I've mentioned in previous videos, podcasts, blog posts that I have some children with autism. And that happened back in the early 2000s, that two of them anyways were diagnosed with autism. When that happened, I really took a deep dive into figuring out what autism was. I wanted to read books and to talk to people and to research and to really understand what was going on. And so I read numerous books, and some of them pretty good and some of them less so. But there's one book that I wish that I had read back in the early 2000s when we were first encountering the world of autism. And that is this book here, Uniquely Human by Barry Prizant. Now, it's impossible that I could have read this book then because the book wasn't written. This book is only close to 10 years old at this point, although has just been released a second edition with some updates and some changes. But when I read this book, it was like someone turned on a light. I felt like I understood autism and a way of interacting with people with autism in a totally different way. And it really rang true to what I had experienced getting to know our children and other discussions I'd had and encounters with autism. So basically what this book is about, it's called Uniquely Human, and it's a different way of seeing autism. Traditionally, the way it works for autism, when you're dealing with professionals, whether they are pediatricians or therapists and so on, they look at autistic people and they see the differences. So stimming is one of the things. So if my son was in the room here with me, he'd have two plastic balls with some plastic and he'd be turning them like this, and that's what he does. That's just part of how he self-soothes. That's what stimming refers to. And my daughter likes to touch this part of her eye just at the corner here, and that helps her to self-soothe. Sometimes she does some hand movements. It almost looks like her own version of sign language. And that's just something that they do. And autistic people have other things that they do. Echolalia is one. And so my daughter, if she's not feeling well, she will say, "Are you okay?" And she's not asking if you are okay. She knows that when we sense that there's something wrong, we will say to her, "Are you okay?" So she just repeats it instead of changing the words there to make it to describe it as her experience. She just says, "Are you okay?" And so echolalia is very common. So there's a whole bunch of these different what are often called autistic behaviors that people with autism have. And a lot of the therapy that has been designed has been looking at ways in which you can remove those autistic behaviors and you can make a autistic person act and seem as much as possible like a neurotypical person. And that is the focus of ABA, Applied Behavioral Analysis, which is for a long time has been considered the gold standard for therapy. Our children went through it with not very good results on numerous levels, and that will be something for another video. But what Barry Prizant talks about here in his book is that all of the things that people generally look at as autistic behaviors as things that need to be removed are not things that need to be removed. And he's actually suggesting that the things that we call autistic behaviors are just human behaviors, and they are just manifest in a somewhat different way than a neurotypical might do. So for self-soothing, stimming. We might not do it quite like how my son does it, but a lot of people will tap their feet or play with their keys or click a pen or something like that. We have ways of self-soothing. People even do echolalia. If someone says to you, how's the day going? You might say, how's the day going? As you're taking that moment to think about how you're going to respond. And so you're saying the same sentence that they just said, and that's technically echolalia. We might not do it in quite the way some autistic people do it, but we're doing all of the same things. And so he really argues against pathologizing these kinds of behaviors, and instead just seeing them as being a part of being human. Now, that's not to say you just ignore all of that. The question that he asks throughout this book and encourages people to ask whether they're parents or educators or medical professionals, to ask why. Why is that person all of a sudden humming more and making some more noise? Why are they banging their head? It's not that head banging itself is the worst thing possible. Yes, it can be dangerous, and yes, people have been injured by it. But our first priority should not be so much to make sure that child never bangs their head, but to discover what is it that causes a person to bang their head. For example, we've discovered oftentimes for my son is when he has a headache, he'll start hitting his head. And if we can understand what he's trying to communicate, we can get some painkillers into him that will help him to deal with his headache. And that's much more effective than trying to just physically keep him away from hitting his head. And so asking those kinds of questions and being aware of attempts to communicate and trying to understand that communication. There's so much more in this book. And anytime that I encounter someone who newly has a child diagnosed with autism, this is the book that I point them to. Now, this is the original one, the first edition. A new edition has come out. I have not read it yet, but I know that it is excellent. I listened to the podcast, Uniquely Human, and I'm going to leave a link to that in the show notes so that you can go to that. I do know some of the difference is there's a change in the language. In this book here, he uses person-first language, that is, a person with autism. And I understand that he has changed to identity-first language for the second edition, which is generally preferred by the autism community. And that is referring to an autistic person rather than a person with autism. So I know that's one of the changes. And I'm sure there's some updated research in here as well. But I also know from listening to his podcast that the basic principles are the same. So I'm going to leave a link to this book in the show notes. It's an Amazon affiliate link. And so if you can use that link, that would be much appreciated. That helps support my ability to continue to make these videos and other content. And I also want to point you towards my website. I generally tell people to go to my website, stephenjbedard.com. But this time I'm going to send you to my disability website, which is disabilityandchurch.com. Thank you for watching this video, and God bless.